Welcome to another episode of the Brown and Black Podcast. My name is Jack Rico.
And I'm Mike Sargent.
And every week we take a look at race and pop culture through a brown and black lens. This week we bring you the last of a series of special sponsored episodes celebrating Black History Month, featuring in-depth reviews of films from Universal Pictures Home Entertainment's vault. The theme: Black films that have become cultural phenomenons.
And we dissect that. We break it down. We look at each film. We do a deep dive. And we talk about why that is. Why are they so special? And they're all available to own on digital and disc, and with deleted scenes and special features, which are great. And we're going to talk about that too. And each film that we've covered this month represents a different genre of film.
Thank you to Universal Pictures for the paid support of this episode. In this episode, we will delve into the Oscar-nominated film Straight Outta Compton, a powerful and thought-provoking commentary on the Black experience in America.
So unless you've been living under a rock, you know what this film is about. Straight Outta Compton is about the rise of a group called N.W.A. This is in the mid-'80s. This is during a time where the police were harassing Black people daily. Black neighborhoods, not unlike today, were under attack. Literally, the film opens up with a tank ramming into a home, okay? And let's just hope it was the right home. So I say all that to say that this was a very pivotal time in America, in Black culture, and in music. So N.W.A., let's just say, putting out the kind of songs they were, caused a lot of conflict. And this movie traces, yes, it did. This movie traces people who are now iconic: Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, Eazy-E, DJ Ren, DJ Yella. These are all names that if you know hip hop or if you know rap music at all, you know these names and you know what N.W.A. actually stands for. So Straight Outta Compton is, in my opinion, cannot be overstated about the social significance of this film. All of these things, the finding how the group got together, their rise, their breakup, their solo careers, and then what would have happened if Eazy-E had not passed. Oof. That's what this film is, but it's directed by F. Gary Gray, who started out doing music videos for Ice Cube and directed one of the most famous Ice Cube videos, which is This Was a Good Day. And it's a great music video. It's a great music video. And then his first feature film was Friday, which was Ice Cube's first script. And it was a huge hit. For them to come back over 20 years later and work together to tell the story of this group that rose from South Central LA at 2 hours and 27 minutes, it's epic. And it is worth every minute.
But I had a completely different experience than you, Mike. I'm not a rap fan. I'm not a hip hop fan, even though I grew up in the cradle of New York City.
Same here.
When hip hop was born. How Latinos influenced in the late 70s.
Same here.
Radio, kids, public schools. I mean, this is where hip hop was spread. This is where it was approved. It was in our schools: junior high, high school, New York City, Queens, the Bronx. I don't know about Manhattan. A lot of hip hop to me was scary, Mike. I already lived in a very low income neighborhood. Went to public schools, not private schools. So we were as poor. I was a part of gangs, forced to be in gangs, because if not, they were going to beat me up. I grew up the East Coast version of what a lot of, maybe not as bad as the Compton, right, experience. But damn, man, when there's gangs and drugs and kids going to jail at the age of 14, 15 years old to juvenile delinquency. And for me, when I heard the music just created fear in me. It was aggressive. It was angry. And I thought that I didn't understand the racial implications at 14 about why Public Enemy was speaking about the injustices of society. And I'm like, why are these guys so angry, man? Why? And so there was this toxic machismo as well. Latinos already come from a toxic machista culture in Latin America, very patriarchal. It's whatever the man says. That's just Latin culture for many generations. And then I see rap, hear it on the radio, go to school, hip hop blowing up, and it's hard. I'm afraid, man. I don't identify in any way with that culture, with that aggression. I don't have the same racial implications to 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 fuel that fire. There's a lot of confusion going on. So that's how I got into N.W.A, but it was more of an acquired taste at that time. It wasn't until I was an adult that I got to really understand the power and the why factor more than anything of why this band needed to exist, why these songs needed to be written, and why the world needed to hear it.
That's really, really fascinating. I got to tell you, because, I guess similar to you, but different than you, I was a black nerd. Okay, let's just be real. Okay, I was into science fiction, comic books, movies, things like that. So the music I listened to stuff that nobody listened to. Nobody black anyway. Like I said, I never owned an N.W.A album, and I don't even think I knew what N.W.A stood for back then.
Yeah.
But so I was aware of it. It was part of my culture. I didn't identify with it so much because I didn't walk, talk, dress like any of that. But I was black, so there are a lot of assumptions made about me because of what was happening with black culture by other people. So I definitely I didn't reject it, okay, but I didn't identify with it. Let's put it like that. I could
Yeah.
say I embraced it. So seeing this movie now, and again, as an adult, and like you, as I got older, I appreciated more what was really happening,
The
especially
layers and the
like I said,
context.
yeah, context, and then the fact that that song became like an anthem, and they talk about it in the movie for the riots and for the unrest and the expression. I mean, you got it. So for me, I got it also from the poetry, the lyrics, because if you actually listen, that was the genius. That's what
Yeah.
made Ice Cube. Okay, because
He
he
had
could
a
make
lot
you
to say,
smile.
man.
He had a lot to say. He made you smile and frown at the same time.
Mike, Straight Outta Compton had a huge impact on popular culture and had a mass audience appeal. Not many black movies get to do that. I mean, we've seen Black Panther, but Straight Outta Compton delivered that with a level of prestige that not many people thought that could happen. It became the highest grossing movie from an African American director and showed the explosive power that art, music can have in a society. But when a black man sees this film, Mike, in 2023, let's say it's the first time he's seeing it, or maybe he's rewatching it the way you did. How does this movie look like after Eric Gardner, Tyree Nichols? How is
Well,
it possible that movies like this still haven't changed? The message is still the same, Mike.
well, all right. There are two things. The black male perspective, as a black male. The most. We touched upon this with Queen and Slim last episode. The most the thing that resonates most is the thing that is the most disappointing, and that is nothing has changed. And what we saw with Rodney King, okay, they just beat Rodney King. That's all they did. They beat him. Okay. They killed Tyree Nichols. Okay. They killed George Floyd. Okay. And I can go down the list. So all the police violence, and I just, week to week as we do this, we're February, we're in Black History Month. We're living in a time where, we have states trying to wipe out Black history. So For me, Straight Outta Compton is Black history. It's recent Black history. It's Black history that just happened. They can't deny it. Okay. So, what is fantastic for me about a film like Straight Outta Compton is that it's not fiction. Sure, they may have taken some liberties, they left some things out, but they're still telling a story, and you mentioned before the Latino um, contribution. This is in many ways a small story. It's only about, a handful of young men, but the implications are gigantic. They're global.
Right.
Okay, so it's a small story with global implications. They hint that the effect they're having, and you see how the audience expands from being mostly Black folks to a lot of people who are
Mm-hmm.
enjoying the music, the beats, the lyrics, understanding it, relating to it. That aggression that may have scared you when you were young, you embrace differently when you're older, or depending on what you've experienced. F. Gray talked about how that music for him, when he heard it was his story. He felt
Right.
ownership, and as a young Black man, representation is everything. So even if I don't want to be seen specifically this way, I still know that it's important to have that representation. So the other side of it is, though, you talked about machismo and,
Yeah, I wanted
misogyny.
to
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
go
yeah.
down
I
that
have
route
to
with
say,
you.
well,
Okay.
there's no way not to. Let me put it like that. There's no way
it,
not to.
is this type of masculinity the type of masculinity that we should be glorifying?
Well, you see, I don't think that it's glorified. I don't think that
Well,
this.
doesn't
I
the
don't think
art
it's about.
glorify it?
Well, here's the thing. Film
Like
in many ways.
and I don't mean look. What I'm trying to say is this:
Okay.
pain needs to be expressed. But then, what is the role of art outside of distributing that message? And
Okay.
we know that humans are corruptible. So the purity of the art doesn't always exist on its own. There's always some dirty hands that come in and ruin it. Where maybe this machismo has shaped. Maybe the music at some point deviated from its original goal and he became a lifestyle. And that masculinity is the one that I'm asking. Is that the one? Because I grew up with it, man. I grew up with that masculinity to basically want to beat up people, man. Boxing movies were like my favorite movies because it was people beating up on people.
All right. Let me answer that for you. Okay. First of all, I don't think it's glorification. I think movies, in many ways, because of what they are, larger than life. Okay, that's glorification. So any movie, in many ways, could be glorifying whatever it's showcasing. So I'll say that, but I feel like it's the truth. It's the truth. It was part of that music. It was part of that time. It was part of the culture. It was part of being a Black male, especially at that time. It was good or bad. It was. And I think that you can't pretend that it wasn't. People have criticized it for being too sanitized. Okay. But I think just like you can't, I mean, is 12 years a slave glorifying slavery? I don't think so. But you can't not tell that story. Okay. I mean, that's the same problem I have with not telling Black history, period. Okay. If you don't tell it, not only are you doomed to repeat it, okay, but it's important to embrace it. Germany would never have gotten over their past if they did not face it, and I have to say, because I anticipated you'd ask me about this. Okay. There was a quote, there was a tweet that, Ava DuVernay tweeted around the time that this movie came out. And I think it speaks to what you're talking about. And she tweeted, "To be a woman who loves hip hop at times is to be in love with your abuser, because the music was and is that, and yet the culture is ours." Now,
Wow.
I think, yeah, I think that's pretty powerful, and I think it says what it is. It's like you embrace it. At the same time, you may have issue with it, but it's still yours. There's still, there's still something to it because you understand it, even if you don't agree with it. And uh, she went on to say that all the stifling of our voices as young black people in that place at that time while a war was going on against us. And she said that FDR Gray captured it. And I agree with her. He captured it. It was a moment in time, you know, good or bad, warts and all. It was a moment in time. And, they did what they did. Now, there are tons of leaders in many different ways who are greatly flawed. Okay. Does that mean we should not ever acknowledge them or what they did? So I also think it's instructive. You can look at it now and go, whoa, yeah. Hopefully we don't have to have that as part of rap. And it's still there. There's still rap that still calls women hoes and bitches and this and that. That still goes on. But I think, you know, 20, 30 years on, I don't think it's not going to have the impact on the culture that it did then, and it definitely had some negative impact.
Yeah.
And I can't say I'm proud of my black men at the time. I can't say anything like that. But I also understand that sometimes that machismo,
Right.
that's all you have. That's what you need to have to survive.
Yeah.
And along with it is all the other toxicity that comes with that machismo.
Right.
So
Right. And it's funny because a lot of these actors, like Corey Hawkins is from Juilliard. So he's not necessarily that rough. He had to
you have
learn
to
how to
learn it.
be
You learn.
rough
Well,
and
listen, the
sort
bottom
of,
line is you look in the movie, Easy E wasn't that rough,
yeah, I know.
The whole thing was an image. So
Yeah. An image that then was approved and sort of asserted by the audience. It's like we want more of that image. We like it. It
and that
expresses our anger to what's
exactly,
going on.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Tupac's the perfect example. He was not like from the streets like that, but he represented that image. He talked from that space, and he was huge.
In this next segment, we're going to be talking about the deeper conversation of Straight Outta Compton. This is where we go ahead and be really real a lot about the subject matter that happens in the movies that we're watching. The first thing I want to bring up to you, Mike, is the music industry. And what was it like for N.W.A. at that time as a black group, as a black rap group, talking about the injustices of police brutality, but also about white systems, right? There's a white man by the name of Jerry Heller who was managing them. They weren't making off, they weren't making the money, he was. So what was your thought? And how do you see white people profiteering off of black art?
Well, a couple things here, Jack. I think, the commodification of black pain has been essentially what built this country. So I only see the music business as an extension of that. What we see in music all the time, whether it's an artist like an Elvis watching, then emulating, then ripping off black artists, or it's the producer, managers, the I don't have to even name them, who are wealthy, rich, while the music industry is littered with black musicians who were huge and died penniless or had their money mismanaged or taken advantage by whether it was a manager or the record label or an accountant, and that only really changed with people like Prince, who learned the business and wanted to own the masters and things like that. So to me, I look at something like that and I go, okay, who owns all of James Brown's music? Mick Jagger. So I say that to say, I think that white men, specifically white dominated institutions, which is America, Yeah, this is an ongoing thing. And I love that they cast Paul Giamatti because he's so likable. Like you like Paul Giamatti, you want to hang out with him. Like he seems like he's a nerd and he's fun and he's like he means well, you know. But I really enjoyed his performance of how the layers you start to see certain things about him. I thought it was really played well by Giamatti. I think it may be something that is not talked about that much, but I think he did a great job playing that character because you know you also, and this was the director's cut, that the one that we saw, and there's a moment in there where Easy E confronts Jerry, and he's like, Jerry, sit down. And I don't think it was like that before, but you hear Jerry just kind of goes into automatic. He says the same thing twice, the whole thing twice, and it's like you realize he's kind of rehearsed this. He knew at some point he'd get his hand caught in the cookie jar and he'd have to say something, and he's really ready to justify it. But you also know he's crapping his pants, and I thought it was really a great performance. But I felt it spoke to the larger picture, of countless black artists and rap music. And then I have to say, the worst thing about it is that maybe Suge Knight was worse because it's your own people doing it to you. To me, that's worse. Whether it was, you know, whether it's 5 million or 50 million, I feel it's worse when your own people screw you over. So I have to say that. And I think that is also a product of, like we've talked about, the pedagogy of the oppressed. You get in a position where you're in power and you act like those who disempowered you.
Oh, I know what you're saying, Mike. There's a movie called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom with Viola Davis that came out on Netflix. It spoke about the same issues with black artists and white owners of these record labels, because how many African Americans, how many black people owned their own recording studios at that time? That was very expensive to have. But it was the talent, black talent, that white owners could not live without, because they knew that that was the best. They knew that with their resources and black talent, everyone could make money. That was the promise, right? But then they ended up corrupting these deals. And a lot of this happened with Latinos too. I'm not sure if you remember Fania All Stars. When salsa first started in the 70s, Jerry Marsucci, that dude's an Italian dude from Brooklyn. Him and Johnny Pacheco did Fania, Fania Records. But today, a lot of those records are owned by white people. So to me, I think my question, Mike, when you watch a movie like Straight Outta Compton and you see how Ice Cube and everybody else down the line became wealthy, but not at that moment, not from those contracts, though. My question to you is, how do you solve the issue of black art or even Latino art not being commodified and profiteered from? Because this is cultural appropriation, man. That's the definition of cultural appropriation. It's taking the art of someone else and profiteering from it when it's not yours. But then again, and here's the catch 22, without white record owners, black art can't be expressed at the scale to make them make a living off of it and be famous for their talents, for their gifts. Is there a tightrope? Like, how does that work?
Well, let's put it this way. The systems are in place and they benefit those who put those systems in place. And, that's why certain individuals you have to become a disruptor, essentially. You have to
Right.
disrupt what the status quo is. I think in many ways, one of the inspirational things about Straight Outta Compton is watching both Ice Cube and Dr. Dre walk away.
Yeah.
Ice Cube walked away at that time from $75,000, which I'm sure was a lot of money. He had a baby on the way. He just bought a house, all these things he was saying. Okay. And then You saw that Dre walked away, and that was something like $50 million. But what stood out to me about both of them is they had the belief in themselves, in their own art, and their ability to create it. They were going to do it. You know what? Okay, this is what it is with you. I'm going to just do it. I'm going to do my own thing. Which is what Dre said. Yeah, I'm going to do my own thing. And I think that that's what blacks and Latinos have to do. They have to do their own thing. They have to create their own uh, systems. And I mean, I think that it's beginning to happen. Ava DuVernay has her own, distribution company. And the playing field is getting leveler and leveler to some extent. I mean, the problem is, and even with podcasting, let's face it, where you know equipment and perhaps the software and things you need to make a good podcast exist, and everybody can do it. But after a while, there's certain mega corporations that they're the ones that are making all the money off of all these other people who are putting in all this work. And at a certain point, again, if the creator uh, educates themselves, and that's the big mistake that, you know, it's great to have faith, but you have to, if you don't understand something, you need to go to somebody who does. It's worth whatever you got to spend to have that attorney, have that person, and that I think is one of the other things that I thought was strong about the film is while the female characters are clearly not the focus, if it weren't for the women in these two men's lives, things would have gone very different. And I thought that that was a strong message there too. They may be even more underrepresented, but their impact was strong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even the Jerry Heller character knew that who is this woman? Like, is she gonna wake you up? And that's like any abusive relationship. Like you really want to keep the person you're abusing away from anybody that will be able to point out the abuse.
When we think about Straight Outta Compton, you can't talk about this movie without understanding how art can influence societal injustices. You can't. But this is also something not new. In the 50s and the 60s, we were dealing with civil rights. And the music of that time, I mean, we remember it, Motown, Marvin Gaye, they were the soundtrack of those riots. And then you go into like the 70s with the Vietnam War and John Lennon and Bob Dylan. Sam Cooke. Then you go into the 80s and then you have Public Enemy, KRS-One, LL Cool J, Ice-T. In the West Coast, you're getting Tupac. You're getting N.W.A. And they're also, I mean, this is like a form of protest music. And if this is protest music and the movie's being sort of built around this, then isn't this protest cinema?
Well, I think that yes, I would say it is protest cinema. It's protest art. I think that that's something again we touched upon last episode a little bit with Queen and Slim because I feel it has a similar effect in terms
like
of
this
it
activist. Yeah,
it's an activist film. I think, you mentioned that in the 60s we were dealing with civil rights. Dude, we're still dealing with civil rights. Civil rights are still being violated right now. Right now. I guarantee while we are talking and doing this podcast, somebody's civil rights, probably somebody of color, right now, their civil rights are being violated. Okay. If they live through it. So I feel like a film like this also, I feel, the Jews often, they're still making movies about the Holocaust. Okay. And people criticize them for that. But you know what? Their mantra is never forget. Okay. And I think that that is something that, you know, as opposed to what Ron DeSantis wants, we can never forget what's going on right now, what's been going on, and what it took. the courage it took, the courage it took for these men,
Mm-hmm.
with all their flaws, to do what they did at that time, to get up on a stage when the police tell you, do not sing that song, we will arrest you. And they get up on the stage and they do it anyway. That's courage. And that took something. And that took, you don't just do that because, you enjoy the groove. You do that because,
You're willing to
that's,
die for your
yeah,
art.
right. You're protesting.
It's much
You
more
wrote
than
the song.
music.
Exactly. It's much more than music. And again, they are trying to impede on your civil rights. You have free speech and they're telling you, no, you cannot say these things we don't like. So to me, I feel like the role of art is always to motivate, to change. And I think that the reason that this film did so well, again, is not just because of, black people going to see this movie. It's because people got a chance to maybe understand something that they didn't. You
Right.
know, if you go in on like IMDb and you look at all the user reviews, you'll see a lot of people who, well, I was never into rap, and then same. You and I were never like huge rap fans, but seeing this movie gave us a deeper understanding of the time, of the significance, of the power of what they did.
Mike, in this segment, the movie conversation, I want to talk about one thing specific, and I want to kind of just jump out of the gate with this. As I was watching this film, even the second time around, I was asking myself, it's like, how was this movie not nominated for many more Oscars? If you remember back in 2016, Straight Outta Compton and Creed were nominated at the same time, and Michael B. Jordan was a black lead actor for that film. And if you remember, the outcome of that was that we were all going into like, oh my God, it's like black prestige and black event entertainment. Like, this is the future of cinema. This is the peak of black culture. And then if we remember, the outcome of that was that Sylvester Stallone, the white guy, won for Creed, which was essentially a black Rocky movie. And in Straight Outta Compton, the only Oscar nomination it won was for its two white writers. So the black directors, F. Gary Gray in that movie, Ryan Coogler in the other one, each of them completely ignored with their black cast fully
Even
shut
though
out.
even though the film was nominated for Best Picture, they
So
weren't
here's
nominated for
my
Best
question.
Director.
How do you feel about the only Oscar nomination going to these two white men for
Well,
black
okay,
films?
okay. First of all, I mean,
What does that say, Mike?
it says something my mother used to say. That's par for the course. Okay, it's par for the course, and unfortunately, it, let's put it this way: he made a lot of money. The film got nominated for Best Picture, and I think in the industry he is respected. And I'm talking about F. Gary Gray, and I think Ryan Coogler too. Ryan Coogler now has gone on to make the most money making black film of all time, essentially. But I think that these, and again, you were asking before, like, how do we break this paradigm? You just keep it moving. All right, you're not going to get the accolades that your white counterparts will get. Doesn't matter. You keep going ahead. You keep making good work. You keep doing great art. You keep, Beyonce didn't win, but you know what? Her concerts are selling out. She's still doing event. You still have to keep being true to you and your art. So I feel like, these contests and as we've talked about, that validation from that system may be elusive, but it shouldn't stop them. And hopefully it won't.
All I think
That's
about,
that's my
Mike,
take.
is that I don't know. This is going to have to be a generational thing. And let me explain to you why. I understand that the
Please.
goal of black art is to express black culture. I get it. But when that culture is not recognized on a global level because someone is oppressing them, you understand that if you win something, if you're recognized for something, people write about you. It's gotten that validation. But in the Oscars and the Academy, and this is where I'm going to be very specific, F. Gary Gray, if you look, and we'll get into the bonus features in a little while in the next segment, but if you look at all those bonus features, Mike, F. Gary Gray is the real deal, dude. That dude as a leader, as an inspirational leader, as as someone who's as organized as anyone, a true professional. True professional. What he did with that movie was insane. And for it not to be recognized, I'm sorry, you can't just go, well, we got our message across. No, dude, what you did was incredible. And when you have an academy where 90% of the people are white and they're at the age of 62, and we spoke about this with Queen and Slim, where Melina Matsoukas had already bitched and complained that no one at the Golden Globes had seen her movie because it was a black movie. And nobody wanted to hear about the black experience anymore. And so there was almost like, yeah, we'll say we'll watch it, but we ain't going to really watch it. That's what the Academy is doing. The average median age of those voters are 62, old white people. Do you think that they're going to sit back, relax, and appreciate black art when they're living in their mansions, getting driven around in their Bentleys? Do you think that they're going to appreciate this? They're going to sit back and watch this? This is not going to change. And what we have to do years down the line is redo the Oscars. In specific years where there's these asterisks, we're going to go back and give F. Gary Gray his Oscar. This is a travesty that these people aren't being recognized. And so, I don't know, brother, but to me, this ain't going to change anytime soon. This is going to have to be a generational thing. We're going to have to really put people of color numbers voting. We can't have this math problem for the rest of our lives.
So now we're going to get to the bonus features, and there are a number of them. There's behind the scenes, there's deleted scenes, and there are some featurettes on the making of the film, which was completely fascinating because you've got the original N.W.A. members there with their actors playing them, and it was just fascinating.
So
but I have before we get into them, I had a bonus question I wanted to ask you. Because you mentioned something earlier about, the Latino contributions.
Yeah.
And I just want to know, what do you feel would be the Latino equivalent of a Straight Outta Compton? Would it be the Fania All-Stars in that time? Like, what do you feel there could be a movie that could capture?
Absolutely. First of all,
what would it be?
The untold story of how Latinos contributed to hip-hop. The definitive story, not a documentary, but like a scripted sort of biopic,
like a miniseries,
no, I want it to be a film. All right.
Okay.
For example, contributions from Kid Frost, Mellow Man Ace, Cypress Hill, A Lighter Shade of Brown, Gerardo. You remember Rico, Suave, Big Pun,
Lisa,
Joe, Lisa, Spike Lee, Busta Rhymes. They've been out publicly. Go look at it on YouTube, where they have said that Puerto Ricans are also creators, originators of the original hip hop. And that's not really seen. Not that this movie should talk about it, but maybe reference it somehow. And no one wants to reference it. That's my beef in particular of why you see a lot of hip hop movies that don't include Latinos, man. And that is unfair.
Sounds like we're going to make this film. That's what it sounds like. All right. Now I want to get into the bonus features. So for you, what was the most enlightening bonus feature of because you said I came away with the same thing too, like, wow, F. Gary Gray, like I've interviewed him.
I think that was the one, Mike. F. Gary Gray. I mean, I was shocked that he didn't get an Oscar nomination. After you watch these bonus features, once again, I saw the bonus features first, then I saw the movie because it allowed me a bigger context of what to look for. And for me, the detail, the attention to detail from him towards this film and how this film did not mean just the art. It was an expression of Black pain and Black identity, Black trauma, that he used this to me as a healing device for all the things that he grew up with, all the troubles that affected him personally. And then to get together with Dre Cube to do this movie. And you could tell by them themselves. If you look at, Becoming N.W.A, I think is one of the featurette scenes. Man, those featurette scenes were everything to me, man. It just really allowed me to get to know N.W.A from a personal level, from an artistic level, and the broader context of how they felt making this movie and what they felt that this was going to do for their culture.
I agree, and that was probably my favorite. Like Becoming N.W.A was probably my favorite special feature on there, where seeing the because after you watch the movie, like you want to go back, you want to watch like old videos,
Yeah.
You want to say like, all right, so let me look at the real guys, and I agree with you about F. Gary Gray and what he did with this, because I remember reading interviews with him at the time, and he said he was a cameraman for the local news at the time. So he was, during the Rodney King riots, during that time, he was there covering news, and one of the other great things I think that he did with this film is because F. Gary Gray is such a great storyteller. And I think, we've talked about this a little bit before, but, doing music videos or commercials, you really have to know how to tell a story,
Yeah.
quickly, you can get a lot in the frame, but there's also a style, there's a lyricism to music videos, obviously. And I love that lyricism to this film, how the camera goes across the street and
Yeah, well, that
through
was
the
Melina
cars,
Matsoukas
and
in Queen and Slim as well.
yeah, Queen and Slim as well. And I love that feeling of traveling through this world at this time, especially the riot scene. There's a great special feature on
What a scene. What a
how
scene,
important
the
it was
riot
to
scene, man.
recreate that.
Wow.
Yes. And because I remember watching that on TV,
Yeah, me too.
and
We
he
all
said
did,
something very,
dude.
yes. And he said something in that the special features that, that I hope the listeners will watch. And he said that, you know, when you watch those and you're not there, you wonder, well, what could make a community want to destroy their own
Yeah.
community?
That's deep.
What's that about?
That's deep.
And that's what this movie shows you. This movie shows what was going on. I mean, there's a great scene in the movie where, and I don't know how much it's an amalgam or if it actually happened, but there's a great scene in the movie where they're recording their first album and then they get harassed by the police when they're standing out there taking a break. And that was the inspiration for Fuck the Police. And you feel it. You understand right away. You're like, yeah, I understand why he wrote that. You get the motivation. And I think in a biopic, the best thing you can do is understand why the artists created the art that they did.
Well, thanks for tuning in to the Brown and Black podcast. We hope you enjoyed our film analysis of Straight Outta Compton and our 4-part series discussing 4 culturally significant Black films from Universal Pictures' home entertainment vault. Thank you to Universal Pictures for their paid support of this episode.
And just for our Brown and Black listeners, you can buy this movie for $7.50 from now until February 28th at Get Out, Queen and Slim, Straight Outta Compton, Do the Right Thing, and Girls Trip to your movie collection. Just go to voodoo.com and redeem the code Celebrate Black History. No spaces. Celebrate Black History. For details, check out our episode's show notes in the description.
And for those who want to stay updated on upcoming movies, sign up for Universal Pictures Home Entertainment email newsletter at uphe.com/news. That is uphe.com/news. And that's it for this special episode of Brown and Black. If you would like to support this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. Your help will allow us to be heard by many more people. This episode was edited by Joshua Tirado. You can follow our comments and opinions on @BrownBlackPodcast on Twitter, Instagram, and now on YouTube. We'll see you on the next episode of Brown and Black.